need to be walking back and forth, so I might just scoot you over a little bit. Thank you.
This is for the first grader.
First grade, yes. Came to the right place. Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't you do the kinder as well last year?
Probably, yeah. We do all the different grades.
I remember.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, good.
It was a wonderful time.
You stuck with it, and you're still here. Good. How did your
Program.
kinder year go?
Yes,
Good.
everybody loved it.
Oh,
And
good.
My daughter and when I prepare the lesson, like a video that you can download and watch.
Uh-huh.
And we watched it together, and my son loved it too.
Oh, good. And how old's your son? Is he younger, older?
Fourth grader.
Oh, okay.
So it's until like fifth grade,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's no more.
Well, no, there is a middle school curriculum as well. Yeah, it goes through eighth grade. Um, a lot of middle schools, it's not as common because a lot of middle schools have their own art teacher or their own art program. But yeah, it's not as common, but there's definitely the same curriculum, 12 lessons for 6th The what? Oh, right out here in the basket right by the door. Help yourself. Yeah. All right. Well, I know we're expecting quite a few more people, so I think they'll probably be trickling in, but I'm going to play you a little video before we get started, just about what's new at Art in Action, what's coming up, and what you can expect to see in the near future.
What's new at Art in Action this year? In July, we welcomed Mary Carbolino as the Executive Director of Art in Action.
This is truly like coming home for me to be back at Art in Action. Art and arts education for all is near and dear to my heart, and I can't wait to jump in and contribute to the amazing work we are doing. This is going to be a wonderful journey.
In addition to the Judy Slate Legacy line, we are excited to announce that lessons and products will be available for purchase. After a year of testing in classrooms, hosting community and corporate events, and collaborating with Catherine Applegate, author of the children's book Wish Tree, our Yarn Bomb Wish Tree kit for families and small groups will debut during training this year. All materials, the Wish Tree book, and the instruction for finger knitting and assembly are included. In addition to the materials, the Wish Tree book, and project directions, the classroom lesson will include art concepts and vocabulary, discussion questions, curriculum integration ideas, and reflection ideas. This is a perfect way to teach students about empathy and gratitude around the holidays. We have approached these new STEAM lessons by looking at how STEM can be taught through art while aligning with both science and art standards. Each lesson includes a child-friendly animated video based on the STEM topic and the materials needed to teach the lessons. Bundle 1 for grades K to 2nd will feature the following lessons. Changing weather, where students learn about changing weather patterns and signs used to predict them. They use chalk pastels to draw a landscape with a character of their choice in 2 different types of weather. Shape characters, where students will develop their knowledge and understanding of basic shapes, learning how overlapping shapes create new contours. They combine shapes and then add facial features and expressions to personify their unique characters. In Mosaic of Earth and Moon, students learn that in both art and science, small pieces are combined to make something larger, like mosaics and planets. Students work in pairs or small groups to create a mosaic collage of the Earth and the Moon from small paper shapes. Bundle 2, which teaches grades 3rd to 5th, will include grid portrait, where students learn how artists use grids to create a wall mural from a small sketch. The process of enlarging an image with a grid relies on understanding units of measure and ratios. Students will sketch a portrait on a grid, enlarge the portrait, and then create an expressive collage with colored paper and materials. Earth's spheres, which teaches students about Earth's 4 spheres: the biosphere, the hydrosphere, the atmosphere, and geosphere, and how the 4 spheres interconnect with each other. In small groups, students brainstorm and create the 4 spheres and the interconnection between them.
Do you want to go check in up front and then come back?
Representation of the spheres interconnected.
Hi, good morning.
Pattern generator, where students learn how an array of symbols and repetition can create a pattern, like patterns on the fabric. They sketch different symbols and arrange them to create a stamp block to print an array pattern. With the changing demographics of students, especially in California, we're committed to developing a diversified multicultural curriculum that honors and is appropriate for our growing Latino population. Lessons include Mexican alebrijes, where students learn about alebrijes, fancy animals, inspired by Mexican folk artist Pedro Linares. They discover how to balance a 3D sculpture using papier mâché and paint it with brightly colored patterns to show texture. In Aztec Codex, students learn about Codex Cabrera Mayor, featuring Santiago, the Aztec god of corn. They explore the importance that corn plays in Mexican and other indigenous cultures. They will also create a corn hospital and use repeated patterns to decorate the clothing. Students learn how Carrasco's Chicana and feminine voice influenced the creation of a portable mural depicting the history of Los Angeles.
Yes.
Students
I
will
remember,
design and plan
yeah.
a group mural inspired by the history of the community relevant to them, with each student contributing their own piece of it. We look forward to sharing this school year and these new lessons with you.
All right. I know if you missed part of that, I'll play it again during the break and you can see the full thing. Let's get rid of this. Go back to the...
Welcome to Art and
Oops,
STEAM
sorry.
fellow students. Today we will be creating artful characters from 4 very important...
There we go. All right. Let me get these lights back on. Got a few more coming in. All right. Good morning. Thanks, everybody, so much for coming out today and braving the traffic. I think we'll have a few more trickling in as the as we get started, but my name is Joy Vigil. I'll put my name up here. And we are going to be going through the first grade program today. We'll go through all 12 of the lessons and talk a little bit about each one, although the clay lesson I won't talk too much about because there is a separate clay training for those of you who do clay. And I started out probably like most of you when my son was in kindergarten, just volunteering in the classroom, and this is my 5th year as the coordinator for his school. He's now in 8th grade, so he's long past Art in Action, but I'm still there. So just to get an idea, have you guys taught Art in Action? I've spoke to a couple of you already, but is this brand new for some of you? Oh, okay, quite a few. Yeah, good. Has anyone taught the first grade curriculum before to a sibling or no? Okay, good. Well, so this will be a learning experience for those of you who are new. I know we're sort of a few weeks into the school year for a lot of us, so some of you may have taught some lessons already. Or been preparing for them. So if at any point you have some tips to share, if you've had some successes or challenges that you've experienced, this is a great way to find people who might have the same experience or same challenges that you did. All right, so what we're looking at up here is the Art in Action website. If you haven't gotten an access code from your school coordinator, that's something you're going to want to do prior to starting your lesson. Have you guys all gotten that, been able to log on to the website? Anyone have any challenges? Okay, so you haven't done that yet. So your school coordinator, do you know who that person is?
I think I know who she is. Yeah.
Okay, and if not, you can always email Kelly Bravo here at Art in Action and she can help you get your access code. Every year you'll get a unique access code that you'll need to log in to the website to view the lessons. So these are all the lessons K through 5. This is the first grade curriculum here, Art Tells a Story. And when you click on that, that will give you all the lessons throughout the year in order. You do not have to teach the lessons in that particular order, and some people like to shift them around for different reasons. And they do build on each other to a certain extent, but you can certainly swap the order as it suits your needs. It also will tell you on this front screen here how long the lesson is expected to take. So I would say most schools have about 60 minutes or an hour per lesson, but if you've got 30 minutes, 45 minutes, you might take a look through and see, oh, okay, this one looks like it's 75 minutes. That might be one that we're going to skip because we don't have enough time to do that. Or we can break it into 2 separate lessons and do it as 2 classes. And I'll go over some of the ones that really, for me, have taken a long time or a shorter time. Some things that you're going to want to do prior to starting your first lesson. So we talked about touching base with your Art in Action coordinator, get your access code so you can get on the website. Don't wait till the night before your first lesson to do that, because if you have some issues getting on, you don't want to show up and not be able to see the lesson. But if you do, most schools have these books, maybe in their art room, in their classroom somewhere. And this actually will take you through all of the discussion questions, the projects for each and every lesson. None of the, with one exception, there's one lesson that's changed a little bit, and I'll talk about that when we get there. All of the information is still valid. It may not be the most current, but you can certainly just read through the lesson in the book and be able to teach it that way. Another thing you're going to want to do prior to the first lesson is make the kids sketchbooks. So the sketchbook is very simple. It's just a 12 by 18 piece of construction paper. However many pieces of sketch paper you need based on how many lessons you do. So if you do all 12 lessons, you might put 12 pieces of sketch paper in here. They can use front and back if they feel like they need more pages. You can always add pages as you go and expand their sketchbook. Usually first graders, some of the older kids can make their own sketchbook, but first graders, I'll have them made up ahead of time and make sure that they'll put their name on the front. They'll keep their same sketchbook through the whole year and just continue to use that, and then they can get it at the end of the year when they take their projects home. Touch base with your teacher, find out where and when the lessons are scheduled and how you recruit volunteers. Good morning, hi. Sometimes it's the room parent who will help you recruit volunteers. Sometimes it's the lead docent who finds people. I usually find like three helpers is probably good for most of the lessons. Sometimes you won't have any, and you might have the teacher. Yes.
So each lesson, do you think it's good to have helpers in each lesson instead of having like one parent teaching each lesson?
Well, you'll have one lead docent, and then, which is probably you. And then if you have extra parent volunteers in the classroom that can just help with passing out materials, cleanup, spills, getting the kids in smocks or whatever you need to do.
She can be present, but she won't be taking
It depends on the teacher. Some teachers are very actively involved, and some are just, they'll sit in the back of the room and do work. That's their time to, to catch up on things. In public schools, the teacher is typically required to be in the classroom. If you're in a private school or a after-school program of some sort, you may not have the teacher present. So the teacher really will help you, hopefully, with more of the classroom management type situations that might come up. Some of the individual issues with kids. So touch base with your teacher. Also find out if there's like a special signal that she uses to get the kids' attention. It's helpful to get consistency. The kids know what that means, if they do a bump, ba-da-dum, bump, or whatever their signal might be. Also some logistics of the classroom, like do you have a sink where the kids can wash their hands? Do you need to bring in buckets of water for the kids? Do they go to the restroom? How does that work? Do they go as a pair? Just some logistical things that you want to find out. Also, do you have a drying rack? So if you've got these 20 pieces of wet art, where are they going to go? And where are they stored afterwards? Are you going to put them in the classroom? Do you have a bin? Do they take them home right away? In most cases, people will keep the kids' artwork because they'll have art shows or display them somewhere in the school, so they'll keep them till the end of the year and then send them home in a portfolio. But that might change for your school. So just find out those kinds of informational details. All right, so when you're ready to start the lesson and you've gotten your access code, you've gotten on the website, we'll hit the launch lesson, and that will take you to the, I have to log in. Yeah, let's see. Okay, here we are. So this will take you to the overview. This is the first lesson in the series, which is Marc Chagall. This will give you on this overview page all the information, kind of basically what you're going to be learning in the lesson. This section is something that I really have liked. It's called Print Teaching Notes. I don't actually want to print them, but I want to just show you. This is kind of like a Cliff Note version of the entire lesson. So it just gives you the key concepts, a little bit about the artist, a summary of the discussion questions, and then the project directions and the sketch directions. I like to print this out and just be able to hold it as I'm teaching the lesson. Sometimes you are teaching and you just kind of blank out, like what am I asking next? I can't remember. So this is just something that you can kind of refer to. Oh yeah, okay, let's get back on track and what I'm talking about. So I just print these out, leave them in the box with the lesson, and have that ready to go. All right, so I want to get back to my screen. Whoops, wrong thing. Where's my little back arrow? Oh, here. Okay. So then as we scroll down, we'll get to the video of the lesson. I'll play a little bit of it for you. I won't play the whole thing, but just so you can get an idea.
In this lesson, you will learn about the artist, Marc Chagall, and his painting, I Am the Village.
All right, so it will take you through all of the discussion questions that they suggest. It will take you through the sketch and the project. You can skip to those sections if you've read through all the discussion questions and you just want to see what the project is, or you can't remember what the sketch looks like. You can skip to that section. Some people use the video in the classroom and they'll ask, oh, can I just play the video for my kids and just let them watch that? They weren't really intended for the kids to be watching. It's more for the adults to be prepping for the lesson, but people do use them in the classroom. Although I find it's much more engaging if you are talking with the kids and kind of going with what they want to hear about and what their questions are rather than just playing the video. The video will give you a lot more information than probably a first grader's attention span is really going to be able to focus on. So with that in mind, I kind of break it down as in terms of timing. If you have an hour, first graders, I'll usually keep my discussion 7 to 10 minutes. Demonstration of the project about 5 minutes. Sketching for about 5 minutes. The main bulk of your time you want to give them to do the project, right? So 30 to 40 minutes. And then if you have time to do a reflection, which is kind of a recap of the project. Some people like to do it gathering the kids together, looking at a few samples of what the kids have done. Can you pick out some of the key concepts that you find in some of the samples of the kids' artwork? This is just a suggestion. If you have much less time or much more time than this, you can definitely adapt it to your particular situation. Some people will lead the discussion with the kids verbally, and then if the project is really complicated and you feel like I can't demonstrate that project, I'm not going to remember the steps, you can play the video just of the project and let the kids watch it step by step that way. But before you do that, find out what is accessible in your classroom. Do you have a projector? Do you have internet access? How do you, how are you going to show the artwork? Does your school have the posters? Most schools have the large size posters. If you don't, they can also be projected and the kids can look at them on the projector. All right, so here's the overview screen, but if we go to the artist biography section, this will give you information on the artist. So in this case, Marc Chagall. This is not expected that you're going to tell the kids word for word, everything about Marc Chagall, but you might pick out a few details. He was born in Russia. He was born in this year. Something interesting about the year. So, maybe cameras were around, but they weren't as commonly used as they are today, or there were cars at that time, or there weren't, something that the kids can relate to that might have been happening at that time. This also will give you the pronunciation of the artist's name, which is very helpful for some of these.
Marc Chagall.
So some are quite complicated to pronounce, so you're giving them the correct pronunciation. Materials list. That will just list all the different materials that you'll need for the lesson. If you order your supplies through Art in Action, you'll get, depending on which type of supplies you order, some people just order the paper dry supplies, in which case you'll get like the handouts, the colored paper that you'll need for the project. Some people order the full kit with all the paints, the paint brushes, and all of the materials that you'll need. So just double check your situation. Do you order the supplies for the Art in Action? What is the situation? Do you have enough for your classroom? Do you need to, supplement somehow? Some schools source their own materials. So like at our school, we buy our own materials separately because we share with teachers for the classrooms. So you may or may not have exactly what's on the list, and that's fine. You can change up the lessons. It's very flexible in that way. The discussion questions we talked about, directions. This one is reflections. So this would come into this last category, and there's actually a written form that you can use with the kids if you choose. First grade is a little bit youngish to be doing the reflection. I mean, they might be able to do a little bit of the writing, but I think, verbally is probably going to be more effective. Maybe towards the end of the year, if you wanted to try and do a reflection written with them, that would be interesting to see what the kids have to say about, what they liked about the program, what was their favorite thing, what would you change. Then the downloads and resources is going to have the handouts, the key concepts, anything that you'll need to supplement. These are also the labels that are editable online. So if you wanted to print out labels for all the kids in your class, you can get a list of all the names in the classroom and have these done ahead of time. If there's a parent who can't come into the classroom but still wants to help out and they have a color printer at home, they could, do this at home for the whole year for all the lessons, and you can just have those ready to go. That would be really a big help. All right, so that's that.
So we put these labels on the painting, like when the kids are done, do we put them immediately?
So it's up to you. So some people like to use the labels as the name, like how I usually just have the kids write their name on the back, and I use the labels for the ones that I'm putting up in the art show. But some people use the labels instead of having the kids write their name. So it would go on the back of the artwork if in that case, and then you don't have to worry about the kids forgetting to write their name. They would have the label on there. If you don't, make sure you do have the kids write their name and then save the labels for when you're displaying the art piece.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit more about displaying the art piece and where you would put the labels, how to frame them. All right, so let's get into our first lesson. This one, you guys are going to be doing hands-on some of the lessons. Some I'll just show you. So if you want an apron, there's some out in the hallway that you can grab. It shouldn't be too messy. There's also restrooms in the hallway. There's coffee and water in the kitchen. If you guys need to get up for any reason at any time, feel free. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Stop me as we're going. All right, so this piece is called I and the Village by Marc Chagall. It's a pretty well-known piece. Some of the kids might have seen it before. Oh, sorry, I'm blocking you. What do you think the I in the Village stands for?
Oh, it's either I or I connection there.
Yeah, it could be either. And actually, yeah, have you taught this one already? Oh, good. Okay. So you could be my star student. It's actually in the title. It's an I, like a capital letter I, but it's interesting because the eyes are really a focal in this painting as well. So it could have a double meaning of the eyes, and it's hard to see, but there is a line, a very light line connecting these two eyes here. So.
Was it in English, the title? Because Chagall is like
from Russia. Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the title.
From this video, it says it's Chagall himself, the man in green.
Right.
Self-portrait.
Yeah, so this was supposed to be his self-portrait here. But why do you think he was green? Why would he picture himself as green? The kids will have a lot to say about it. He's a zombie, or he's not feeling well, or, they'll have a lot of input onto why his face was green. Yeah. Being on a farm, yeah, right. And it's definitely, he grew up on a farm in a farming village in Russia. So you can definitely see a lot of imagery that relates to farming, like this man right here is carrying a piece of farming equipment. The kids will not think that. Oh, he's killing this lady, and that's why like, oh, it's interesting to see what they interpret. But it's like, oh no, this is equipment for farming. It's used to cut down grain or wheat. We see this woman here milking a cow. Why do you think some of the houses and some of the people are upside down?
I think the whole painting is a fantasy.
Yeah.
Like a dream. So
Very
it's
good.
more realistic.
Yes, absolutely. There are some realistic things in the painting. We can identify, animals. We can identify these as houses. But it's like a fantasy inspired by maybe dreams. And it becomes a little bit abstracted in the way that he's depicted them. What kind of shapes do you see? What stands out to you? Triangles, okay. Anything else? Circles, yeah.
And moon shape.
Moon shapes, very good. So crescents, we see, a couple of repetition of crescent shapes. I think there's several crescents down here. Also, it's hard to see maybe in the back there, but there's a lot of crosses. There's a church here. So Chagall's religion was very important to him. He was Jewish, and it was a big part of his life. So he depicted a lot of details about his personal life in this painting. Sometimes the first graders, they love to talk about, personal experiences or things that they can relate to, and it can go off track pretty easily. You know, I have kids, oh, they painted a Pokeball right here. You know, it's like, oh, that can lead into a whole, you know, separate discussion, but you can kind of rein them back in. Oh, why does it look like a Pokeball? Well, it's a circle. Oh, it's a circle. Where else do you see circles? Do you see how the artist has repeated the circular shape and kind of bring them back into the art discussion? So what do you guys notice about the colors? What stands out? What color stands out to you? Red, okay. Green, okay. Yeah. What do we know about red, yellow, and blue? What are those colors called? Primary. Yeah, so they learned that in kindergarten. They may have forgotten about it, but we can go back to, yes, red, yellow, and blue are called primary colors because you can mix a lot of other colors just from those three primaries. And we can come back and bring out our color wheel. And maybe you have little ones that you can put at the kids' tables and you can show them. These are the primary colors. And in between, these colors are called secondary colors. And if we want to know how to make these secondary colors, we just need to look at the primary colors on either side, and we'll know how to mix the secondary color in between. So if we forget and we're not sure how to make orange, we know we've got yellow and red are our primaries. If we mix those together, we're going to get that secondary color. All right, so for this project, you guys are going to get a pre-printed sheet that looks like this, and they're going to have paper in secondary colors, so there'll be orange, green, and purple. And when I'm teaching this class, I like to demonstrate to the kids. We talked about the secondary colors and how we get secondary colors, so let's check. Let's do an experiment. If I were to put, and I'll use a clear cup or a clear container like this, if I were to put yellow and a little bit of red in this container, what do you think is going to happen? What's it going to make? And the kids are usually pretty on top of this. All right, so I'm going to use my watercolor brush, and the watercolor brush is the one that has the softer bristles. They need to hold water. So we'll do this experiment in front of the class. And you'll notice when I put in the paint, I put in a lot of yellow and just a little bit of red. So the red is very dominant because it's so much darker. And what do we get? We got orange. Yay! You know, the kids are very excited. Oh, we made orange. Okay, so we've got that one. And then what do you think is going to happen if we put in yellow and a little bit of blue? Let's see. Do I have another watercolor brush? I'm going to borrow one of yours, but I'll give you enough. Yep, we got our another secondary color. We got green. And then for our third one, and this one's a little bit tricky. Sometimes it comes out not quite looking too purple. It looks a little more burgundy, but it's pretty close. All right, so to the end of our blue here, and we'll see what we get. And we got pretty much a purple, yeah. All right, so we've shown the kids, we've demonstrated that we can get our secondary colors from our primary colors. And the reason I'm doing this is we're going to use these actually as part of the project. They're going to have a wash that they're going to put over their drawings. So I'm going to hang on to these. And you guys are going to do this project right along with, but I'll show you first the sketch. For the sketch, they're going to be sketching ideas that tell a story about themselves. And it can be favorite foods, favorite places, animals that they like, sports that they like. They're going to be drawing with their sketch pencil, which you know they should have at your school. I'm going to show you with a Sharpie just to demonstrate, but so you can see better in the back. You can show them how things can be created just out of geometric shapes. So you can, if you start with just a square and a triangle, now I've got a house, right? So if I start with a triangle and a semicircle, I've got an ice cream cone, right? So I'm just doing basic geometric shapes and telling a story about me. And maybe you can talk about, well, I'm going to draw myself doing an activity that I like. Maybe I'm jumping rope, and how you can draw a little story that tells about yourself. Yes?
What is your tip for, because I helped art class in
Uh-huh.
kindergarten.
Okay.
And I noticed that when the teacher did an example
Uh-huh.
of yours, we had 20 kids
Doing the same thing? Yeah.
So what is your tip for like showing an example but letting them feel open to do whatever they want?
Well, I think that is going to happen. Sometimes they get a little bit stuck on where to start. And I don't think it's a bad thing that they copy. You know, it's not going to look exactly like yours. And if they just need a starting point, I think it's fine. Something you could encourage or help them generate ideas is, what are some other things you can think of? So maybe my favorite food is ice cream. What's your favorite food? And just have them start talking about ideas. You could even write some down on a board. So if they're like, oh, you know, I can't remember, I don't know what to draw, they can have something to refer to. Some people like to take away the sample and not leave it up while the kids are doing the project. I don't. I usually leave them up. But if you're finding that's a problem, do the sample and then take it away. You know, put it face down. If they want to look at it, they can, but it's not like in your face, you have to draw this. Yeah. But I don't really think, you know, you're always going to have some kids that are going to do the same, and hopefully they'll start feeling more confident throughout the year and generate more of their own ideas. All right, so then on your final project, like I said, you're going to get these 2 sheets separately. And actually, there's several parts to this project. It's not complicated, but there are a few parts. In the video, it suggests doing it in one way, and I do it a little bit different, and I'll tell you what I do differently. Let me show you the video. So in the video, what it tells you to do is have the kids draw their story about me on this paper, then do the watercolor wash, then mount it, and then there's a written portion where they write a story about themselves. So I've always found that once they do the watercolor wash, the paper is very, very wet, and it's very difficult to then mount it and then have the kids go back and write their story. So I actually pre-mount. This is what I use. So I pre-mount the white on the background. I drew these lines and pre-marked the lines so the kids have sort of a guideline of where to write their story. You can see there's an example of a couple of different ways people have done that. Some don't do lines and just let the kids write in this space. I find that the kids tend to write, if you don't have the lines, they write very, very small. And so it'll be just like this little part. This encourages them to kind of fill the space and write a little more. But it's up to you. If you have less time and you're just doing this part of it, that's fine. You can just have the kids do the drawing portion, and you don't have to do the mounting and the writing portion. It's completely up to your discretion. So in your packet right there, you're going to have a square of white paper as your first one. If you would like to pre-mark the shapes, you can. It's up to you.
So the packet that comes with the white already have those lines?
Yes. Yes. It will not have these lines on there. That is something, if you want to add, you can add that yourself. It'll just be a blank sheet. So in the center section, the kids are going to draw a portrait of themselves. So they can either do a frontal view. So we saw in the Chagall painting that we've got Chagall in the profile or side view, but we do have some figures that are also frontal view. So they can choose, you know, do they want to do a profile or a frontal view? Some kids will draw their entire body, so they'll have their whole body in the space. Some kids will use the circle as their face, and so that will be the, you know, they'll just put the eyes and this will be their face. So it's up to them however they want to do it, but they'll pick something that looks like their skin tone. They'll color that in, and you guys can do this too. If you want to draw the lines so it's pre-marked, you can. They're using for this lesson oil pastels. if you've taught the kindergarten program, they've used those quite a bit in the kindergarten program. They're very similar to crayons, but they do blend a little bit. They're blending with their fingers. So they can put in a head and the neck, then come in and they can put in features. You guys all have your oil pastels? Yeah. Okay. The oil pastels, let me show you the top of the box. It looks like these are the oil pastels. All right, so they've got their self-portrait in the middle.
Is it the same as the soft pastels?
No, they're two different things. The soft pastels are chalk. Yeah, these are oil pastels. We'll be using the chalk pastels a little bit later. All right, so their self-portrait. Then in one of the sections, they're going to be drawing favorite food. So I'll just say I'm going to put it in this section here. It doesn't really matter what section they use for which topic. And as they're drawing, you can encourage them, use your white oil pastel to draw some mystery objects, because they're going to put a watercolor wash on top of it. And what will happen is, as they put the wash, the mystery objects are going to show up. Now, if the oil pastel is a little dirty, it's not quite as mysterious, but so you have a couple of examples. And then what the kids are going to do is turn the paper a quarter turn each time they're drawing the next section, so that there's going to be some sections are upside down, some are sideways, just like we saw in the Chagall example. So that one section might be a favorite animal. All right, then I'm going to turn my paper, and the next section might be a place that they enjoy going to. So a favorite place, maybe it's their home, maybe it's their school, a park. They're using their geometric shapes. They're coloring nice and dark. All right, so then you're going to turn their paper again, and they'll draw themselves doing a favorite activity or favorite sport. So they can just draw stick figures if they want to get a little more involved and they want to draw themselves a little more complicated, they can certainly do that. All right, so I'm going to draw something with my mystery white again. Maybe I'm playing ball and I'm in the grass. All right, so hopefully they're going to color in a little bit more. I'm just going very quickly so you guys can see what I'm doing. Then at this point, I will have them do all of the dry sections first. So I'll have them actually write their story before they then go on to the wash. So they can write something about themselves. I like baseball. I have a pet fish, whatever they want to write. And their stories are very, very cute and very charming. I love reading what they come up with, and some of the spelling errors make it even more fun to see. All right, then they're going to go on and they're going to do a wash over the top of their different sections. And I like to set it up as a wash station. It depends on your circumstances, where you're teaching your lesson, how you can set up your classroom. But basically, I set up my classroom something like this. I sit at the front. I have the kids sit on the floor when we do the discussion. So if there's a carpeted area or someplace where they can gather. That lets me set up my tables with all the materials where the kids aren't accessing them, because if there's materials in front of them, they're going to want to be touching. It's going to be very distracting. So we'll do the discussion. I send them back to the work tables. Then for this particular one, I set up a couple extra tables for a wash station. So I don't have the wet wash in the same area where they're doing their dry drawing and their writing. So when they finish this part, they can come back over to their wash station. This might be where you have 1 or 2 volunteers stationed, and just say, when you're doing your wash, make sure you're wiping the side of your brush on the cup so it's not too wet. You don't want it too drippy. You also want to make sure that they're keeping the same brush with each color. So they're not taking this brush, then going to the green, and then going to the purple, because it's all going to turn brown after a while. So keep the washes separate. So you might have, a spot in between where they lay their paper. They just kind of go down the line. Do each color with the corresponding brush. I didn't test my colors before, but you should probably do that, because as they sit, sometimes the paint will, settle on the bottom, or you might have made it too dark or too light, and you can test it out ahead of time. All right, so they can wash right over their oil pastel. It will resist the watercolor to a certain extent. And they can choose how they want to color their sections, if they want to do some sort of pattern, if they want to do it randomly. Turn your paper around, then do a wash in the different section. Now these brushes are quite small. If you have a larger brush, this is maybe a little bit too large. If you have something like this, or even a in-between size, it can help this process go a little bit faster. But either way, this one works fine. The kids might have to wait a little bit. You'll find that at the beginning, there'll be a few that are done quickly, ready to wash, and then there'll be a whole bunch of kids that are done at the same time. So they might have to wait a little bit as they're doing the wash. Let's see how this white starts showing up. All right, so my mystery white object is starting to show through. And then what will happen is, if the kids get this all painted and they're, oh, I'm done, and they hold it up, sometimes the paint will start dripping down, and it's all over their writing. So what I like to do is just have my drying rack right next to the wash station. Have your volunteers just, take it. Hopefully they'll just go down the line, keep their paper flat, and then just slide it right onto the drying rack, so you're not having that dripping problem. If it drips a little bit, no big deal. But that's why you kind of have the volunteers remind them, wipe the side of your brush. You might have a little damp sponge. If the brush gets really wet, they can just tap it on there and dry it off a bit. So I'm going to pass these around as you guys are finishing your drawings. If you want to experiment with the wash, don't feel like you have, oh wow, look at yours. Very nice. Much better than my example.
I wasn't talking.
We'll start passing these back, and then you can just paint one section or more than one if you like, and you can give that a try. All right, any questions on that one? Any tips that you guys maybe have? Yeah. Yeah, so ultimately all 4 sections will be covered. They won't have, I'll show you one that's completed. Oh, and this isn't completed. I only have 3 sections painted, but ultimately it will be all painted. So they can choose if they want to do like one color in the middle and do, a pattern. They can do random, however they want to place their colors is fine. It's up to them.
Basically, we just give them 3 colors. They can decide on where they go.
Exactly, yeah. I like to have more than one setup of 3, so I'll have one that I make in front of the classroom and maybe one that's pre-made, so that you can have up to 6 kids potentially, depending on your space, working at the same time. because there will be a time when you have a lot that are ready to go. All right, so that's that first lesson. Oh, while I'm talking about Marc Chagall, just to show you, this is one of my favorite books about Chagall. I don't know if you guys have a library in your art room or anything, or can check out from the public library and bring in. It's called I Am Marc Chagall. And it's really, the artwork in it is really interesting the way that they've done it. They're like these little dioramas that are kind of in this folk art style, and it just fits so well with his style of art and it actually features this eye in the village in one of these dioramas. Let's see. So it's a neat story. This one has that picture in it. It talks just about Marc Chagall and how he became an artist and his childhood in Russia. I do like to have books on hand. If the kids finish early, you can have a small group where parents can, read the book with them, or the kids can browse through the materials themselves, because you will have a big variation on how long it takes the kids to do the project. Some will finish really early. So I'll have books, I'll have drawing paper, they can free draw. Maybe you have art related like dot to dots or word searches or something that they can have on hand.
She would go in and to the internet and she would find that artist inspired coloring
Oh, okay.
pattern, and then she will just paint it out, paint it out, and then kids can just color.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was great.
I don't know if you guys heard that, but she was saying that her teacher will go online and print out artist-inspired coloring pages. So it might not be the same piece that they're talking about, but it might be another Chagall piece that they can then just work on if they have spare time. All right. Any other questions before we go on to our next project? You can just continue passing the wash around as we're talking and finish up your project. I will go ahead and move on to the next lesson. All right, this one is inspired by an African Banda mask, very different from the Chagall project. Let's go, whoops, oh, wait a minute. Here we go, okay. All right, so here's the Banda mask. Now, how do we know that this is a mask? Can we tell that this is a three-dimensional object? And what are the clues? How can we tell? Yeah, you can see kind of the side of it. It's tipped a little bit, so you can kind of see that it's got a depth to it. Anything else that makes it look kind of three-dimensional? The material, yeah. So this would probably be carved out of wood. And carving would mean that the artist would take away some parts and some parts would be raised. So if you were to feel this in person, obviously this is a photo, it doesn't have a texture to it, but if you were to feel this, it would have a rough texture in certain places. Now you can get like these replica African masks if you want to have something to bring in to show the kids. So you can show how it would be dimensional, or how it would have some raised parts and some lowered parts, have some texture to it. I would caution against passing anything around with first graders because I've done that in the past, and it causes a lot of drama. It seems like it would be very easy, but I would just show it and then have it available, and the kids can look at it afterwards. If you try to pass it around in the discussion, you'll get completely off track. All right, so you can talk about how masks were used in this culture. What do you think that masks might have been used for? Okay. War, possibly, yeah. Yes. Ceremonies, absolutely, yeah. So special celebrations or ceremonies. The kids might not know what a ceremony means. You can explain to them. It could be a celebration of a special occasion. It could be offering prayers, so in their religion or their beliefs. Now, do you think this is a person or an animal? A person, okay. So what do you think? This person has horns? Or is it a combination? The features look a lot like a person. You know, you've got eyes and nose similar to a person. But we have these horns. We kind of have these, well, it could be a mustache, but it could almost be like whiskers. A monster could be. Yeah, it could be a combination of different animals. If you think about kind of the side view, it almost looks maybe like a crocodile or an alligator shaped mouth. So we don't really know exactly what they were trying to depict, but oftentimes, like very similar to when we wear masks at Halloween, if we want to channel some of the spirit of that animal or that creature that they're wearing, they could be channeling some of the attributes of that animal. We can ask the kids, what sort of geometric shapes do you see? Do you see any shapes in here? Triangles, yeah. We've got a lot of triangles, diamonds, repeated patterns, right? And the colors. Do we see a lot of bright colors in here? Not a lot. You know, they're more natural colors. So some of these would be pigments that were made from natural materials. So a lot of browns and blacks, they might be made from crushed up rocks or clay. And so they're using colors of sources that they can find in nature. All right, so the kids are going to be learning about proportions of the face. Every year they do some version of a self-portrait and learning how to draw the face. The features we talked about looks fairly human. And we've got this, let's see, handout, which you probably recognize from kindergarten. It's the same one. It's the primary version of how to draw a face, just the simple how to draw a face. And you can go over with the kids again the proportions and where the features are if there's some who didn't do the kindergarten program, or you know, just a good refresher. I'll have the kids put their hand on the top of their head and put their hand under the chin and just say, bring your hands together at about the same rate and see where they end up, and hopefully it's somewhere around the eye. Hopefully. But yeah, usually the kids will put eyes very high on the face and they don't necessarily realize that they're really closer to the middle of the face. And we can talk about the horizontal line versus a vertical line. What features are on the horizontal line versus the vertical line. So in their sketchbook, they're going to practice. I'm going to use the Sharpie if I can find it so you guys can see it a little bit better. They're going to practice drawing a face, and sometimes it's hard for them to just put their pencil down and start drawing an oval. You know, they get very caught up in, I can't draw an oval perfectly. Sometimes it's helpful to have them air draw. So hold their pencil above the paper a little bit, just air draw an oval, air draw the features of the face if they want to, where things might go, before they actually put their pencil down. And then they're kind of warmed up and they're ready to go. So they got their oval. They can put their vertical line down the center, a horizontal line down the center, and then put in the features. So we said the eyes are on this center horizontal line. We've got kind of an almond or football shape for the eyes, and we've got the circles in the middle for the irises and the pupils. And actually, I think you guys have as your next sheet a sketch paper. So if you would like to practice sketching a face right along. Then for this primary face drawing, we just have them draw the nose like an upside down 7. And that will go on your center vertical line. And then the mouth, they might do just a, simple line. They might do something that's a little bit more dimensional, whatever expression they feel like they want to show. Generally, the ears start right about at the eye line. So if they're going to draw in ears, if they have short hair and they want to draw in their ears, let them know we're seeing the ears. If we're doing a frontal view, we're not seeing the full ear. We're seeing kind of the side view of the ear. And then if they want to add in some features, well, a lot of times kids will draw the neck just like a little, kind of stick like that. So have them feel like, where does your neck start? How thick is your neck? Where does it go? And have them realize that it's kind of coming down. And how does your hair grow? Does your hair just grow like right in the middle center of the top of your head? I mean, some people maybe, but usually it comes down a little bit onto your forehead. So show them how the hair might come down. They can add in some features if they want to add in eyebrows, whatever they want to add. So you've got their basic face. Oops. All right, then this project is actually a collage, and you're not going to do this part of it. You'll do just the face shape. I'll show you this part of it. What you guys are going to get is a pre-marked tan sheet of paper, and there's a couple ways you can do this. You can either have the kids do this themselves, where they cut out this face shape. Then what they're going to do is they're going to fold the face shape. So they're going to fold it in half vertically, and they're going to then fold it again horizontally. So depending on how much time and kind of, what you want to let the kids do, I usually will do this ahead of time, and I give them this. So it's pre-folded and pre-cut, but I will have them go back and fold it again themselves so they get the experience of half vertical, half horizontal. It is very hard for them to fold this, especially vertically. It's challenging. So I usually kind of have those lines there to give them that little helper. But you can certainly have them do it themselves, and if you have a lot of volunteers, maybe that's something where they can go around and kind of assist them with lining up these sides. And then they're going to cut out facial features on the vertical and the horizontal lines. So they're going to fold their paper. If they would like to draw, it's very helpful to draw their features in. So they can pick and draw their eye on the horizontal line. On the vertical line, they're going to draw a nose. So we're going to do our upside down 7. But when they're doing their nose, don't have them go all the way to the center on the top, and I'll show you why. And then they can do their mouth. Now maybe they don't want the mouth to be a traditional mouth shape. Maybe they want a different shape. All right, so then they're going to cut. So I'll cut, let's cut the eyes first. They'll fold their paper again, and they're going to cut. So they're really just cutting half an eye. They'll do the same on the other side. All right, open it up, and then you've got your eyes. Then on the center vertical line, they're going to cut out the nose. And the reason why we didn't cut or draw all the way to the center is that we want to leave the nose attached so that it can pop out and be a little bit of a dimensional feature. So you can fold it and make it dimensional. Now this is hard for the kids. If they cut it out, it's fine. I mean, no big deal. If they, don't worry about it. It's fine. No stress. And then this will be whatever mouth shape that they want, and then they've got their face shape. All right. So then they're going to, again, they're going to be using oil pastels to start out with, and they can decorate their mask. You can talk about some of the patterns that we saw on the example, and they can do some symmetrical designs. They can add geometric shapes however they want. So I'm going to do mine symmetrical, and maybe I'm going to do some little details. Maybe he's going to have a mustache like that guy. Whatever you want to, however they want to decorate. That'll be the first step. And then they're going to also collage with paper. So you can demonstrate some paper cutting techniques. This is a great time to use your scrap if you have a scrap bin of paper. So some techniques that you might show might be fringe, which they've learned in kindergarten, but they might need a little refresher. They're probably pretty good at it. But this can be used as hair, it can be used as a beard, eyelashes. You can show them the fold, cut once and make two. So if they take a long piece and they fold it in half and they cut out a shape, then they would have two. So if they were going to make like horns or, you know, fangs or something, whatever they want to make. And then they're going to glue these pieces on. Everybody does glue a little bit differently. The kids like to use a lot of glue, but you can tell them, you know, this is paper. It doesn't require, you know, a giant puddle of glue. You just need little dots. So demonstrate how you would just place small dots if you're giving them the bottle, you know, small dots of glue, and that's really all that you need. Some people like to put glue in a paper plate or a little bottle lid or something, and the kids will apply it with like if you have old paintbrushes that you just use for glue. Some people use Q-tips and have the kids dot their glue on with Q-tip. Up to you, whatever you find works best for you. I always give them the bottle because when I give them paper plates with a Q-tip, the Q-tip does not rest nicely on the edge. It rests in the middle of the glue, and so I find that the Q-tip becomes very messy, and I just, you know, maintain my glue bottles afterwards. I clean off the top and close the lid, and that way they don't get all clogged up. But it's up to you, whatever you feel like works best. Then you will also get, in your packet, you'll get raffia. And you can separate this out into bundles. If the kids would like to add raffia, let me see, did I bring one that has raffia attached? I didn't, but if they want to add raffia, you'll probably need a couple of hole punches, maybe a little table with someone that can help them punch a couple holes in the sides, tie on, which they'll need help with, they'll need an adult helper, and tie on some long raffia strings that just hang down. Sometimes the kids will want to tie the mask onto their face with the raffia, but it doesn't really line up exactly with their face. It's more of kind of a decorative element, but it's kind of cute. They'll walk around with the masks on their face. All right, so that is the Bonda mask. Any questions on that one? It's a fun one. It's pretty easy. Yeah?
This one, do you need it mounted on the paper, the background paper, or no?
You won't get that as part of your kit, but you can do that if you want. That's a way you can display it at, you know, if you have an art show or at the library, and you can choose a color that complements. So that, yeah, that would be extra paper that you would just have at your school.
So the outline of the face, we need to draw ourselves. It doesn't come.
You know, I think that the paper comes and maybe some of you that buy the supplies through Art in Action will know this better than me. Does the paper, it does. Okay, I see nodding in the back. So it comes pre-printed with the face shape on it. So you can either give it to the kids to cut out or pre-cut the shape yourself. All right. Yes?
Is there a number of kids that's standard for the box? Like, is it for 25 students or for 20 students?
I think there's a 24 box, and there's also a 6 box. So if you have more than 24, you might put them together. You might order a 24 and a 6. Or I think there might, is there also a 12, Jana? Jana, is there a 12 box that you can order of supplies, or is it just 24 and 6?
Yeah, 24 and 6.
24 and 6. Okay, thank you. All right, so that's the Bonda mask. And the next one is Paul Klee. And this one is called Sinbad the Sailor. So do you guys think this is a scary scene or a funny scene, or what do you feel is the mood? Scary. Okay, the colors make it look scary. Anybody else have a different opinion? Or
Animals are suffering. Animals, they're suffering.
Yeah, you can see he's kind of like stabbing them here and there's blood dripping down, right? It's a little bit scary. They're suffering. But you kind of look at some of the colors are dark. You know, over here it looks sort of foreboding. But then you look at him, I guess Sinbad, and he's kind of done almost like a comic character, you know, so it's a little bit of both. He's got the bright colors. He's very much simplified. It's not really realistic, so, you know, the size of him compared to the size of the boat is pretty unrealistic. So it's a little bit comedy and it's a little bit scary. You know, some of the lines that he's used, he's got these sharp fangs right here. Some of the jagged and diagonal lines give you a little more of a scary impression versus the rounded, more rounded shapes give it a little more of a calm or comic mood. So Paul Klee really liked children's artwork and was very much inspired by children's artwork. He liked to put feelings in his paintings, so it's more of an abstract, kind of expressionist piece. And this one would be a seascape. So the kids are familiar with landscapes, so this is something a little bit different, a seascape. And they're going to be drawing sea creatures. So there is a handout that shows different sea creatures and how to draw them. So these are some examples that they can have at their table to draw. There's different photos. I like to collect photos from different places. Old calendars are a great resource if you can find fish that are different shapes. You know, so some might be more rounded. Let's see, jellyfish. Oh, if you can find some that have, more spiky fins. It's kind of neat to show them the difference, you know, the different types of fish that there are and the different lines that you can incorporate when you're sketching. Oops. So this one is a finger paint project. I'm not going to make you do it, so don't worry. I'll just show you. But it is quite quick, so if you don't have a lot of time, this is a good one that goes very quickly. And don't be scared of the finger paint projects. They're not that bad, but you do need to have an exit strategy. So you want to plan a little bit ahead, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that. The first thing the kids are going to do is they're going to draw different sea creatures. So have them experiment with drawing some that maybe are more rounded shapes. Maybe there's fins that are rounded. And some that maybe are more jagged shapes. And how do they feel different? You know, does this one feel more scary? Does this one feel more friendly? You know, what are the differences? Have them draw maybe some seaweed, some different sea creatures, maybe a jellyfish or a crab, different sea creatures that they want to draw. And they can spend more time on their sketch because the project is pretty quick. So let them have some time to experiment. Then they're going to get this finger paint paper. And if you guys have used this before, you know kind of some of the challenges. It's very, very thin. So when it gets covered with finger paint, you can imagine that when the kids, you know, try to pick it up, it folds on itself really easily, it tears really easily. It sticks to everything. So when you're thinking about the project, you want to first know where the kids are going to wash their hands. So if they have to go to the restroom and they're finger painting, you might want an intermediate, maybe a wipe or a towel or something or a bucket that they're not going into the restroom and having paint all over their hands and then it's all on the faucets. Or it's buckets maybe in the classroom where they can wash their hands right there. Make sure that they put their names, or if you have the labels, put those on the back of the artwork before they get started, because once they get the paint on there, it's going to be really, really difficult to put their name on the back. All right, so when they've got that, you'll have your paper, your newspaper covering your tables or whatever surface you're going to have the kids be working on. the adults will come around and they're going to squirt this on the paper. This is liquid starch. It comes in usually containers that look like this. I get mine at Smart and Final. I think you can get them at on Amazon or different places like that. Most schools have them emptied into these squirt bottles. And this would be something that the adults would then come around and they would squirt maybe about a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons onto the paper, and the kids will take their hand and they will just spread it all around the paper. Now, if you find that they didn't have quite enough on there, you can come back. You want to cover the paper, but not so much that it's super saturated and drippy. And this just helps the movement of the paint. So it'll make the paint be a little bit more pliable once you get it on the paper. All right, so the kids are moving their starch around. Then the adults will come around and they're going to squirt on about the same amount of blue paint. And the kids will again come through and spread the blue all across their paper. Yes, this one I hear someone saying we need help. Yes, already planning ahead. Yeah, so you do need helpers. It's not actually as bad as it might sound, but it is great to have the kids wear an old t-shirt, a smock. I'll show you this one in a minute. That's the one I use. I bought it from IKEA. It's very inexpensive. You don't have anything at your school. It might be something to think about. But they're going to create their background. So they'll cover their background with a blue paint, and they can create, waves, show them how it looks different when they use a finger versus a nail versus maybe the side of their hand. What are the different things they can make? If they're not happy with their design, you got to get your eraser and start over. So they'll be able to play around with this a little bit. Maybe I'm going to put my waves up here. And then they're going to draw a large sea creature. Maybe it's a fish, maybe it's a, jellyfish or a whale or something in the center, and they just draw with their finger. Then they can put in other details. Maybe I want to put in some seaweed. Maybe I want to put in a jellyfish back here. Anything they want. Smaller fish. Maybe it's a different shape fish that I've got. All right, so they're just scratching that in with their finger. Make sure they're not scratching like too hard so that they're tearing through the paper. And then they're going to add some color. So if they want to wipe their hands in between, they can wipe them off a little bit, or they can just have it blend with the background. And they'll get 3 colors. So they'll have red, yellow, and green. And I tell them use 1 finger per color. They're not going to add a lot of color. It'll just be, touches of color here and there. So where they want their color to stand out. And then I'm going to switch to another finger, and I'll do my yellow with my next finger. I'm going to do this fish with a little color. I'm going to switch to another finger, and I'm going to have my green. And just add little touches of color. Now at this point, when you see that the kids have gotten here, that's when you should say, oh, are you done? And then, because it's very easy for this to get overworked. Once they start adding the color, then, they want to just keep going. And it can easily turn into just a big purple swamp, So I would say, oh, it looks like you're all done. Let's put that on the drying rack for you, when it gets to this part. So putting it on the drying rack is another challenge. So if the kids try to pick it up themselves, it will fold very easily on itself. If you leave it on the table to dry and you've got newspaper on your tables, it will dry and stick to the newspaper. So you need to move it. So at least move it to a dry piece of newspaper. I have a collection of these in my classroom. It's just anything that's about the size of the paper that can be laminated, that just gives it a little bit of stability under the paper, so I will just usually, slide these under, and then you can move it a lot easier onto your drying rack. A lot of school districts have a laminator that you can use, so if you have extra construction paper or something just hanging around, if you can get a supply of them laminated, it's very helpful. If not, it's no big deal. Just move it onto a dry piece of newspaper. The ideal is if you move it onto a dry surface and then you move it, let it dry a little bit, and then move it a little bit again. Because even still, it will still stick around the edges, especially if they have a lot of paint on the back. It will dry and stick. I mean, it's not a big deal. You can always trim off a little bit around the edges if it rips. All right, so that is that one. And this is the smock that I usually use. It's just from IKEA. I want to say it's just about $3 a piece. They're very small. They only fit maybe a small second grader. But it's just a thought if you guys need something for your school. It's plastic. You can just wipe it down, and it's very easy and convenient. Let me show you. Oh, so this would be an example, like if when you've mounted it on a background, you can do one of the primary colors and mount those and have that be your finished project. All right, so this one's more about the process than the final project, really. I mean, some of them, if they do come out like all mixed up together, it's fine. It's not a big deal, but they've gotten the chance to experiment with finger paint. Some kids might not want to touch the paint, especially if there's any sensory issues or if they're really clean and they just don't want to touch. I would encourage them to try if at all possible, but if they really don't want to, you can put, if they have gloves or something that's a non-latex glove, they can put on one hand and use that. If you really need to give them a brush and that's all they want to do, then that's up to you. I mean, but I would say give it to them. At least they get the experience of doing the project. It will be catching. Once one student has a brush, then everyone around is going to want the brush. So just be aware that could happen. Any questions on that one before we go on? All right, let's move on to the next one. This one's quite a complicated lesson. It's based on a Polynesian tapa cloth. So it's actually a textile. Let me get back to my lesson screen here. And you can see this one suggests that it takes about 75 minutes. I find that you can do it in an hour, but it is a little bit tricky. So it's one that if you're thinking about putting something out of order and you want to put it later in the year when the kids are a little bit older, it might be something to think about. So this is actually made out of bark from a mulberry tree that's pounded very thin, and they can pound sections of it to join them together to make a larger piece. And they were often used in special ceremonies, so they were very valuable fabrics that people would make into clothes. Oops, I'm holding it upside down. You can't really tell. They could make it into clothing or decorative items for the house, wall hangings, that type of thing. Again, if you feel this, it would have a kind of a rough texture to it because it is the bark. In this lesson, I actually end up talking a lot about Moana. And it's a little bit dated now, but some of the first graders might not know that much about it. But I loved how in that movie they were just so true to the art of that culture. Moana's clothing and Maui's clothing were made out of tapa cloth. And the grandma had all these tapa cloths hanging in her hut, and they would tell stories on the tapa cloths about their village and their history and their culture. So there's a whole section, like in this book, about what tapa is and how it's made and how it tells these stories. So it's something that the kids can relate to. It's kind of interesting to them. Oh, I know Moana, I know that. I'll leave these out so you can take a look. I don't know, you may not want this particular book, but online there's lots of images and lots of information about how they went about creating Moana's costume and the tapa cloth inspiration behind it. So the kids are going to be creating, and this is actually a print making lesson. So they're going to be doing a print. And what they're going to be doing first is they're going to be experimenting with drawing different designs. So in the inspiration, we see examples of geometric shapes, which we've talked about a lot with the kids, so different geometric shapes. But there's also organic shapes. So organic shapes are more inspired by things in nature. So things that might be inspired by plants, by leaves, by, maybe this is inspired by the sun or mountains. So organic and geometric shapes. They'll practice first in their sketchbook some different shapes, and there is a handout with the different Polynesian designs. Now they don't have to practice only these designs. They can practice whatever designs that they want, but these are good inspirations. So maybe tell them to practice maybe a geometric type of design, and then also maybe one that's more organic. Right, so something inspired by nature. So they can practice a few different ones. When they've decided on their favorite, they're going to have a little square of the sketch paper, and they're going to choose a design that they like. So let's see, I'm going to choose, maybe I'll choose the leaf shape, and they'll sketch it on their square. Then they're also going to get a square of this foam, which is scratch foam, and they're going to be transferring their design onto this scratch foam. So what they're going to do is they're going to place their sketch on top of the foam. They're going to take their pencil and then they're going to go over the lines, hopefully without pushing through the paper, but if they do, it's okay. And actually, the key to this is making sure that they press hard enough to get a good impression on their foam. And you can kind of hear it when they're, you can tell them listen, because you can kind of hear this like cracking of the foam. All right, so they'll just trace over their design. Simple designs tend to work better. Larger shapes work better. If they do something really teeny tiny, it's hard to get a good impression. Now I can see my design here, but it's not very deep. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to go over, and you can kind of see how hard I'm pushing. I want a very distinct indentation. So they should be able to feel, where their design is indented in the paper. All right, so they have their design. Then they're going to get a long sheet of paper like this. What it tells you to do in the video is to have them trace around their squares. So they have a series of squares on either side, filling this whole paper. What I like to do instead actually is to fold the paper, and I pre-fold it because I don't like those pencil lines of the squares, but it's up to you if that's, if you want to have the kids do that. I fold the paper in half, and then thirds. And I'll do it a little neater than I'm doing it now, but you get that same effect of the squares, but you don't have that little pencil line. So I'll just give them the paper like this. And then they will have their design, and they're going to have a printing station. So at their printing station, they will have a square of linoleum tile. They'll have foam rollers like this. And you're going to have the paint squirted on the tiles. The kids are going to roll their roller in the paint. So sometimes it takes that initial rolling of the roller takes a lot of paint because it hasn't been saturated yet. So you might want to pre-roll some so it has some paint on it. Then you're going to, actually before they start painting, you're going to want to make a little handle for the back of their foam square. And the way you do that is just with the masking tape or painter's tape. Put one end down, then kind of raise it up a little mountain in the middle, and then put the other end down. So there's a little piece that they can then grab onto, because this is going to be their stamp. So they're going to roll. And theirs can be laid down on the newspaper if that's easier. They're going to roll the paint onto the stamp. Now you need to... So if you put this directly into the paint, what will happen is it gets too much paint and it floods this design. It works better if you, some kids will do that, you know, they'll just, okay. But it doesn't come out quite as clear of a print. But, you know, we'll let them experiment and try it out. Now the key is getting the right amount of paint, like not too much, and because if there's too much paint, you can't get a good impression. If there's not enough paint, it won't saturate the background. So what will happen is after a while, these rollers will get very, very saturated with paint because all the kids want to roll it in the paint whether or not it's got a ton of paint in it already. So you might have one set that you put out and then halfway through you can switch them if you have that available, or if you've got someone who can kind of be washing them out, make sure they're very, very dry. If they get wet and runny, then it's not good either. So then they're going to take their design and they're going to stamp it. So they're going to lay it down gently, kind of rub around to see if it's transferred. They can lift up a little corner and kind of see, does it look like it's transferred? And then they can lift it off and they'll see their design. And you can see how their design is the negative. So if you flood that with too much paint, it's not going to show up. And that will happen with a lot of the kids that will get a lot of paint on it. So really make sure that go around and double check their designs. Have you pushed hard enough with your pencil? Is it really a good indented line? Right, then they can either, so if you've got them two squares, they can alternate and do a pattern. They can trade with a friend, you know, so if they really like someone else's design, and they can choose how they want to stamp theirs. Maybe they only want to use their design, but they want to use two different colors. And I believe the lesson calls for more of the natural shades like the Tapacloth, so it's red, orange, brown, and black, I believe are the colors. But you can certainly change that up if you've got a preference for one or the other. I'll show you. This is a student sample, and this was one of the more successful ones that the kids have done. I thought he did a pretty good job. But you can see, you know, this one obviously had a little bit too much paint on it, so it wasn't as clean of a print. Sometimes the kids will stamp like a few and then be like, I'm done. You know, I don't want to do any more. You can always cut, you know, if you want to give them a smaller sheet of paper, if they only want to do that much. That's fine too. What's that? Oh, it's just the regular construction paper that we use. Yeah, tan construction paper.
How many rollers and blocks do you have out for an average classroom? It seems like it'll be very time consuming.
Yes, it is. It's time consuming, and it's like, again, it's similar to the wash station where a lot of kids are ready all at the same time, and then it's kind of a waiting game, and you have to make sure that on the side of where you have your blocks that you have enough space for them to lay out a paper. So if you have 24 kids, I'm trying to think, I usually will have 6 squares with, you know, depending on how many colors. So if you have 3 colors, you might have 2 of each color and like 2 or 3 rollers a piece. So you'll have a square, and then you can have one kid working on this side, one kid working on this side with their separate rollers. But there's still going to be some waiting, and depending on what supplies you have available, you know, you use what you have. Right?
Does the roller come with the packet?
If you get the full packet with the paints and everything, you should get the roller in there as well. If you just get the paper pack, then it won't. If you've been doing art in action at your school for a while, it's something you probably have on hand, but definitely double check, you know, and the squares as well. These are something you can just get at Home Depot or whatever, you know, if you don't have enough.
They only come with one roller?
No, I think probably 6 rollers in a classroom pack. Does that sound right? In a pack of about 6 rollers for 24? Yeah. All right, any more questions on that one? It is challenging, and you might not, a lot of them might not come out perfectly, but that's okay. I mean, I think they really enjoy seeing the process of the printmaking. It's kind of fascinating for them to do. And they'll do another print lesson in 5th grade, so that by that point they'll be much more experienced. All right, let's go back to our lessons, and this one is, all right, so this is George Seurat, and it is his painting called The Circus. Do you guys notice anything interesting or different about the technique? Yes, yes. It's painted with dots, right? So what he used was a technique called pointillism. And he painted with small dots of color. And he did that because when our eye looks at color, it does something called visual mixing. So if you put, for example, dots of red and yellow very, very close to each other, your eye will mix them into orange as you're seeing it from far away. He doesn't actually have to paint with orange, but you'll create that visual mixing. So the technique is something different that the kids are going to be learning about. Now, who do you think is closest to us in this painting? This guy here? Yeah, how do you know? He's bigger, yeah. So objects that are in the foreground or closest to us are often bigger than objects in the background. So we see these people way back here are very, very small in comparison. So that's a technique that artists use to show us things that are closer versus farther away. Then we've got here in the middle ground kind of our action. That's something that the artist wants to focus on. The action is often placed in the middle ground. Now, is this horse moving or is it standing still? Moving. How do we know? Yeah, exactly. The angle and the lines of its legs. So if I'm standing like this and my arms and my legs are straight, it's giving the impression of still, standing still. But once you have a diagonal line, it conveys the sense of movement. So he's got this sense of movement going on here. So the kids are learning foreground, middle ground, background. They're learning about pointillism. They're learning about movement. What kind of mood do these colors create? Happy, yeah, he's got a lot of vibrant, warm colors, creating sort of a happy mood. The circus theme was very popular at the time he was painting. And the kids are going to be doing a pointillism technique in this lesson. And you guys are going to be doing this one as well. So the next piece in your packet should be a white sheet that looks kind of like this. Yep. All right, so what you are going to get, the kids are going to be doing butterflies in a pointillism technique. And they can practice, let's see. These are just pictures of butterflies. There we go. They can practice in their sketchbook drawing different styles of butterflies if they like. You know, how do they draw the butterfly body? What is special about butterflies? They're usually very symmetrical. So one side of the body looks exactly like the other side. So you can talk a little bit about symmetry and patterns that you might find on butterflies. But what the kids are going to be getting is actually a template. So I would double check. This takes a lot of time if this hasn't already been done for you. These are templates that need to be cut out. So you'll get, oh, a collective groan. Hopefully somebody at your school in past years has done this and they're just sitting in a drawer somewhere already ready for you. But if not, you may have to cut these out. And what the kids are going to then do is trace them on their final paper. So you can have them draw their own if you really like are opposed to cutting out all these templates. You can have them just draw their own butterfly, and that's what you guys are going to do because you don't have the templates at your table. So on your white sheet, you can just draw your own butterfly. But the kids will trace their template and make sure they know that this is a template and know what this is, because some kids will start painting right on the template rather than tracing around it. All right, so here's your butterfly. They can then come in and add if they want to add any pattern. So remember, there's symmetry. Okay, then you're going to be painting, but not with a paintbrush. They're going to be painting with a Q-tip. And they're going to be simulating this pointillism technique. So they'll have red, yellow, and blue. They can come around with their Q-tip and use the Q-tip dotting. Show them how they dot with the Q-tip. A lot of them will just want to spread, you know, like a paintbrush with a Q-tip, but show them how they can dot with a Q-tip. You'll have these Q-tips in your little box and you can do your pointillism butterfly. And then demonstrate how you can then take another color. If you take it right next to the other, you don't get as much visual mixing with this one. You get a lot of actual mixing. You kind of start getting some purples where the red and blue meet. All right. So they'll come around. They'll have more than one Q-tip, and they can do their different colors, fill in their whole butterfly. And then they can take their Q-tip and mix a little bit of yellow, red, and blue together, and they'll make a brown. So I don't have them do this till the very end, because otherwise they use up all their primary colors and they just have brown. It's kind of a purpley brown that you end up with. And they can use that to do their center body, their antenna, however they want to use that color in the design. All right, so this one is actually a very fast lesson as well. There are two different butterfly designs. So if you find that you have a lot of time left over and you've cut out enough of these templates, they can do two different butterflies. I've seen people have the kids do two of the same, and they will mount them back to back and then hang them like from string for an art show or something. So like they're flying, it's kind of cute, like hang them from a branch. You can also, if you're mounting these for an art show, you can also cut this out and just glue the center down and then fold the wings up so they're kind of a dimensional project. This one, if the kids are doing something in the classroom, like sometimes the kids will be, hatching is not the right word, but have butterflies in their classroom. It's kind of a neat way to incorporate the curriculum into the art project. If they're doing that around the same time, you can plan your butterfly lesson when they're going to release their butterflies, and then they can observe. All right, any questions on that one? You guys can keep going with your pointillism, and I'm going to I think we'll do one more and then we'll take a quick break. Yeah, let's do one. All right. So I'll start telling you about this one while you guys are working on your project. This one is A Winter Scene by Peter Bruegel. This one, let me check the year. It was 1565 this was painted, so quite a long time ago. He liked to paint everyday scenes of everyday life in his village. He was born in Holland. So, being that this is a winter scene, it's nice to plan it in the winter time, if you can. So can you tell what these people are doing in here? Skating, yeah, they're skating. Some of them look like maybe they're playing hockey here. This river is frozen. Does it look like they're going somewhere, or this river goes somewhere far? Somewhere close? Can we tell? Might be far, yeah. It kind of looks like it's going off in the distance. We've got some buildings back here, very faint in the distance, so it looks like it could be extending up into the distance. And we'll notice how this river is very wide, and then it gradually gets narrower and narrower as it gets further away. So it's starting to get that idea of perspective to the kids. So things, as they're closer, they look wider. They start to narrow as they look like they're getting farther away. And we can start teaching the kids, there's a kind of a line here, right where the sky meets the land. There's a special name for that line, and it's called a horizon line. So sometimes it might be where the sea or the ocean meets the sky. It might be where mountains meet the sky, but that's the horizon line. So as the objects are getting closer to the horizon line, we can see objects that are further away have less detail. They're lighter in color. They're smaller. So we're seeing a lot of these techniques that the artist used to show distance. And again, we come back to this feeling of movement with the people's arms and their legs are showing us that they're skating, they're playing a game, they're doing an activity. A lot of realistic details. We can see kind of down here, this is a bird trap here where all these birds are circling. And again, we've got a lot of detail here in the foreground, our action in the middle ground, and then we've got some faint details here in the background. So we're reinforcing foreground, middle ground, and background that we just talked about. They're learning horizon line as a new term. All right, then when I'm teaching this lesson, I like to have the kids tell me, what's your favorite winter sport, or what's something that you can think of. All right, come up and show me a pose from that sport. So I actually will have them come to the front of the room, and they'll, oh, I'm skiing, or I'm ice skating, or whatever. And then you can, if you feel comfortable, you can, or you can have one of the students come up and draw them in that pose and see what they come up with. So if I'm drawing somebody and they're going to be a skater pose, maybe they're doing this pose, or maybe they're skiing and they're going to be turned sideways. And so it's kind of fun. Maybe you can get your teacher to come up and pose. That would be fun too. But there is a new handout for this one. So if you don't get the supplies new every year and you just are using your old handouts, you might double check the website, because this is a little bit different. It's a great example of different sporting poses, just stick figure poses that the kids can use for reference. So they'll practice that in their sketchbooks. You can have someone be posing while they're sketching in their sketchbook, or they can just come up with their own ideas. Right. Then they're going to have a sheet of blue paper. And they're going to be, again, going back and using their oil pastels. And they're going to draw a horizon line. And they should make it fairly high because they want enough space to do their action in the middle ground. And then they're going to create sort of a triangle shape over on one side. So what they're doing is they're dividing their paper into foreground, middle ground, and background. And they're going to be drawing a winter scene. So in the foreground, they might do, well, I'm going to start with my background. In the background, they can draw houses or a village, and they're going to think about making those objects fairly small because they're farther away. So I'm going to draw my village back here. You guys have a blue paper as your next one. You can keep going with your butterfly. If you want to start on your winter scene, you can, and go back to your butterfly, up to you. So here's some houses in my background. They're very, very small. So you'll divide your paper into the 3 sections. Yes, oil pastels again. All right, so small, and then I'm going to come to my foreground, and in the foreground I think I'm going to have a large object, so I'm going to do a large tree in my foreground. And I'm making it large because it's closer to me and I want to convey that impression that it's close. So I've got a tree. And then maybe I'm going to do a snowman also in my foreground. And then in your middle ground, you're going to have your action. So any winter sport or winter activity that they can think of that they want to draw can be in the middle ground. Maybe it's kids playing hockey. And they can add different winter accessories if they want, scarves, sweaters, clothing. All right, so they'll have their action in the middle ground. And then, I've used all my Q-tips. Let's see. Oh, you're going to need one too, so I'll get an extra one. Let's see. If you run out of Q-tips, just let me know and I'll pass you one back. They're going to use a Q-tip and they're going to add details of snow with paint. So they'll have white paint and they can do snow flakes falling. They can do snow maybe gathered on the leaves of the tree, on the roofs of the houses. Maybe a big snow bank near the river. They can mix in the paint with their oil pastel on their snowman. Now in the final, this can be the end of it, and that's perfectly fine. If you want to give them a little something extra special, you can give them the chance to maybe do some glitter. So everybody's a little hesitant, but glitter is not that bad. I have the adults control the glitter, but often the kids, you know, what I'll do is I'll have them put the paint on. I generally will add a little bit of white glue in with my paint to make it a little bit stickier, knowing that I'm going to add the glitter. And I'll have them come up to a glitter station. So they will have a little box. This one's bigger than I usually use. I'll usually use one of those little Costco ones, you know, for Nutella or something size. And they put their piece in the box, and then the adults will come along and sprinkle a little bit of glitter. This is one with kind of crystal flakes. You can also get just the smaller, finer crystal glitter, but it does add a really nice kind of just sparkle effect that sort of looks like snow. It will stick to wherever they have painted, but oftentimes they will find they have not sufficiently painted to accommodate the glittering that they would like to do. So they might like to go back and add a little bit more, and then they will do the glitter. You collect it in a box, and then you can just dump it back in, and it's not too bad. But they do love the glitter. It's a nice kind of carrot at the end of the stick, so they finish the project and complete it. I'll show you this one. Let's see. So this is the one that has kind of the flakes, the crystallized flakes, and this is one that just has the finer glitter. So you can think about, you know, with just a little bit different look, but they both give it that little sparkle of snow. Any questions on that one? Otherwise, we'll take like a quick about 10-minute break. We'll come back and then we'll get started with the rest of our lessons. You guys good? If you want to keep working on your projects, you're welcome to work on those during the break, and we'll come back around 11. Oh yeah, it's right here. Yeah, I really love this one. I think I saw it first at the library, and I went and bought my own copy because I liked the illustration so much. Oh, sure. Are you going to take off? Yeah. Okay. Well, good luck. Yeah. Have a good year. Yeah. Oh, that always gets in the way. Yeah. Well, good. Yeah. Enjoy your year. And you can always email here if you have any other questions. You know, this is actually a live stream. So people can watch it now. Oh, I should mute myself. This lesson is the one exception. Remember, I was saying that you're going to find most of them in the book. This lesson is actually a little bit different than what's in the book. The project is the same, but the inspiration and the lesson is a little bit different. So this is what you probably have at school. It's the Cling It Rattle. This is actually what the project is based on now. So it's a bear sculpture by Bill Reed is the name of the artist. So this we're not doing anymore because there were some issues with it being kind of a sacred object in this culture, and so we're trying to be sensitive to that, and we've switched to this inspiration. It's exactly the same project, and it's the clay project. So if you don't do clay, you may not have to worry about this. If you do clay and you do it for all the grades, it would be very helpful if you were interested in attending a clay training. I'm not going to talk too much about the clay because there is a separate training. It'll go over the clay projects for all the years, so K through 5. So it could be valuable to get that in if you're going to be doing that ongoing. There's a lot of kind of particular things about clay and the way that your school might do clay. Some schools have a kiln on site where they can fire clay at the school. Some schools take them to somewhere to get fired. Some schools don't, and they might just use air dry or an oven bake type of clay. So you might find out what your school does and have that information. So this again is a three-dimensional, similar to the masks, three-dimensional object, and we can see that this does have some depth to it, so that's how we can tell it's a 3D. And we can see in this case we've got some cast shadows underneath, and that also helps us tell that it's a three-dimensional object. What kind of animal? Well, I told you the name of the title, but if I didn't tell you, what do you think this would, what kind of animal would it be? Could you tell that it's a bear? Some might say a dog or a wolf, or yeah, it's got some features that might look like a bear, but it doesn't look very realistically like a bear. It's a kind of a stylized version. Any idea why he might have chosen to sculpt a bear? So the Haida usually would sculpt or feature animals that were important to their culture, that lived nearby. He was born in Canada, and he had a mother who was from the Haida culture, and so he was considered a Haida artist. And again, you can see the colors similar to like the tapa cloth are very natural, so browns, reds, blacks, things that you could make from elements found in nature. So this one was actually sculpted out of wood. So again, it would be carved, so parts of it would be taken away. You would be able to feel that it has a texture to it. Now the kids are going to be sculpting their own animal out of clay. And what they're going to be doing is kind of a pinch-pull technique. I don't have a clay to demonstrate, but I can show you the final project. So what they'll get is a ball of clay. They'll shape it into sort of a kind of an oval shape, and they'll use a craft stick. And what they'll do is they'll put a line vertically and a line horizontally, so it kind of divides it into 4 sections. Then they pinch one end, almost like a bowling pin shape, and that will be the head of their animal. Then the 4 sections will get pinched to make their legs. So they can choose what kind of animal. There's a lot of opportunity with just that basic, sectioning technique to sculpt it then into different types of animals. It's a little challenging for first graders. It works best if they can keep the clay as one piece, but you should definitely teach them if your clay breaks. If you're going to add a piece on, you want to teach them the score and slip technique. So slip is what we use for clay glue. So it's basically just clay really watered down with a lot of water. And scoring means they're going to put lines, so they're roughing up their clay to give it a little more tooth. Then they put the slip on it and they join 2 pieces of clay together. Now ideally, they would keep their clay as one piece. and not add on a lot of little pieces, because that's where you end up getting a lot of breakage happening, especially with first graders, because they don't always score and slip sufficiently. But just let them know ahead of time. You know, clay is very fragile. There's going to be some that break. It's not a tragedy if it does break. You know, this is how we learn. This is what we're experimenting, especially if you take it to the kiln, because things can happen in the firing process, and you know, you will have some breakage. Now this one, and you can look at these afterwards, but this one looks like it was made out of like a Model Magic. It's a very lightweight, so that's something that you guys can do, and painted just with tempera paint. This one looks like it was a red clay, fired and then put a glaze on top of it. And again, so if you've got just that dividing technique, this is an animal that they've then just turned this way. And so the 4, instead of being 4 legs, 2 became wings and 2 became feet, and that same pinch pull technique. And I'll show you a couple more examples. So this is white clay versus the red clay. And again, so it's just that dividing into 4, you know, you've got your 4 legs, you just shape it to be whatever type of animal. If the kids are having a hard time, like a turtle, whoops, is a very easy one to make because, you know, you want to encourage them to make something that kind of has short legs and can balance pretty easily. If they choose to make a flamingo, you know, or something, you're going to have a hard time because it's going to be very skinny. You need to be able to balance their piece. So they can then take their craft pick and add, if they want to add texture, dots, scales, you know, whatever they want to on their animal. Then depending on how you add your glazes and color, I always have the kids paint the same day that they sculpt their clay. So I have them sculpt their clay, they paint it when it's wet, and then I fire it. But they have to leave enough of the clay unpainted so that when it goes into the kiln, it will off gas. And these are things that you'll learn more about in the clay training if you're really getting into how you fire clay. So I won't talk too much more about that, but you guys can look at the different options and just know that if you don't have a kiln, you can still do the project many different ways. Any questions about clay? I think there's also a clay training in January, so if you miss the ones or you can't go to October, I think there's another one that repeats in January. Yeah.
Is it the 16th and 17th or one or the other?
I think it's both. Yeah, well, you don't have to go to both, but it's offered on both days. I think one's an evening and one's a morning, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so that is whoops. All right. So this one is a painting by Claude Monet, Bridge Over a Pool of Water Lilies. Now, do you think this looks like a realistic painting? No. Some no's. I see some yeses. It's fairly realistic, right? I mean, if you look at it, and I always like to show, you can find pictures online very easily of Monet's actual garden. It still exists, and you can visit it. I don't know. I can't tell if this is upside down. And you can see this actual bridge and the actual pond, and I like to show kids what it looks like in real life in a photo versus what it looks like in the painting. So it's fairly realistic, but it's what a technique called impressionism. So Monet was an impressionist. So rather than painting meticulously all the little details with a fine brush, he painted his impression, and he was mostly concerned or very concerned with the effects of light in his art. So the way that the sunlight reacted at different times of day, how it affected the different colors. Let's see. You can see, oh, here's one with the, I have one with the bridge. I don't think I have one with the bridge. Anyway, so this is a picture of like a real water lily. And you can see kind of the difference between all the detail that you see in a photo versus what you see. It's kind of just the color, just a quick impression. So much like when you see somebody and you say a first impression. So it's kind of what you think about somebody on a first glance. It's kind of what you think about the scene on your first glance. And so he would often paint pretty quickly with a large brush, showing some large brush strokes, but it still gives you a pretty realistic view of the scene. This is a cute book that I like about Monet too, Linné and Monet's Garden. So it has photos of the real garden as well as a story. It's fun to share with the kids. All right, so they're going to be, I want to talk about where are we, the viewer, standing in this scene? Are we standing on the bridge? No, because if we were standing on the bridge, we wouldn't be able to see this side view of the bridge, right? So we're probably standing somewhere out here on the other side of this pond, looking into the bridge and looking slightly up at the bridge, so we're a little bit lower. We're not at the same eye level. So they're going to be doing an impressionist landscape scene. They're going to sketch first. And I thought I was getting organized and I got all disorganized. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Okay. So you can talk about some of the landscape details that they saw in that painting. You know, we saw a bridge, we saw a pond, we saw some trees or bushes, maybe some tall grasses, some water lilies, lily pads. And so they can just do a quick sketch in their sketchbook of their landscape scene. Then they're going to get this turquoise paper, and you should have this as your next one in your packet if you want to pull the turquoise paper out. All right, so on their turquoise paper, they're going to go back again and they're going to sketch with their sketch pencil. Now they're not going to put a lot of detail into this sketch because they're going to paint actually right over it. And it seems kind of like, well, why are they sketching? They're just going to paint over it. Well, it just gives them kind of a good frame of reference of where they want to situate features in their painting. All right, then they're going to so sketch your scene however you want to do it. I'll put this up if you guys want to refer to Monet. All right, then they're going to have their tempera brush, and the tempera brush has a lot stiffer, firmer bristles than the watercolor brush. So if you find that in your box, you can feel that it's a lot stiffer than the watercolor brush. Now the tempera paints, you really don't need to add water. The water would just be for cleaning your brush. And for this project, I actually don't put water out at all. I just let them mix. I let the colors kind of mix, but it's up to you. If you want to add water, you can, but I'll show you kind of without the water. What the kids are going to do is go over their entire paper with white. Now they don't have to cover every inch of the paper. You can leave some of the turquoise showing around the edges or on the side. And they are covering up a lot of their sketch, but they'll have still a kind of a reference point of where they're going to put their landscape features. And they're just using quick brush strokes. They're allowing the texture of the brush strokes to show. All right, and it's fairly well covered. And then they can put in their landscape features. Now you can remind them of how they mix their secondary colors. They'll have a palette that has yellow, red, blue, green along with their white, so they can choose what colors they want to paint their features. Now I'm going to start with maybe my bridge. I'm not washing my brush at all. I'm just going to kind of let it mix in with the white. But you can certainly choose to give them water, or you can put maybe a damp sponge if they want to just wipe some of the paint off without actually adding water. I kind of like the effect of how it mixes in with the white. It gives it just a little more of a soft impressionist feel. All right, so then you've got your bridge, and then maybe I'm going to mix some blues and greens to do the pond. Some people might feel like, I'm not an artist, I don't have any art background, I don't feel comfortable. Now, I'm certainly not like, doing any fantastic piece of art. As you know, I'm going quickly. I'm demonstrating the project to the kids. You do not have to feel like you need to have an art background at all to demonstrate or do these projects. Especially with first grade, they're going to just, they're going to appreciate getting the chance to play with the materials and do the project. All right, so I'm going to put in maybe some grasses. If you guys need any more paint, just raise your hand and I'll pass them back if you run out. Some tall grasses in my foreground. Maybe I'm going to have some trees or bushes in the background. So you guys can keep working and put in as many features as you like, but then they're going to put in their water lilies in the pond and lily pads, and they're going to be using a sponge for that. So they'll have a little sponge square, and they can dip that in those colors, and they can make lily pads. They can make their water lilies. They want to mix with a little bit of white and make some pink. Water lilies, they can do that too. It can be either way. I mean, I wouldn't want it to be soggy wet. If it's going to be slightly damp, that's fine too. Or it can be dry. Mine's dry and I'm using it that way. It's fine. And then if you want to add a little bit of yellow, remember we talked about how the effects of light were very important to the Impressionists. So maybe where's the sunlight hitting, and add some little light techniques. Some kids might want to put a little sun up in the sky. It's up to them. All right. So keep going on that. Do I have another finished one? Finished one. But this is a really fun one. They usually have a really good result with, you don't have to be particularly artistic, but you can get a good result with that one. All right, so that is Monet. All right, while you're working on that, I'm going to get started on our next lesson, which is Romare Bearden. All right, so this is Romare Bearden. This is one of my favorite projects of the whole curriculum. It is time consuming. I wonder what I recommend. I'll see. It's a good hour. But who do you think this woman is? Someone in charge. Okay, she's the boss. Anybody else?
Or she's wealthy.
Wealthy. Okay. What makes you think that? What are the clues?
She's got
The staff or something here. Yeah. Uh-huh.
and there's an umbrella.
Right.
Somebody's holding an umbrella.
Yes, exactly. Someone's holding an umbrella for her. And the name of this painting is Queen of Sheba. So she's Probably a queen, yeah. Yeah, and she's definitely, the important person in this photo. We can tell by some of the clues that you've pointed out. Also, we've got this figure over here, and he's kind of cut off. He's maybe smaller than her, maybe not quite as important. But if you look at this painting, it's actually was a collage. So this is flat, so you can't really tell. It's a combination of painting and collage, but he would cut out different pieces and put them together and combine them with painting to make his art. He lived in Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance, so it was kind of an explosion of culture and art and music at that time. Now, what do you think this blue is here? Do you think he painted that blue? Or do you think it's the background showing through? Like he just cut sections and let the background show through here? Yeah, so he would join the pieces together but not necessarily make them touching, so you could still get another color without adding another layer. And take a look at their faces. Do they look realistic? I mean, we can tell they're people, but they're not detailed. Yeah, so they're very stylized, kind of simplified. All right, so the kids are learning in this lesson about the proportions of the body. So they learn the proportions of the face. So now we're taking that to the next level and learning the body. So the way that we teach them the proportions of the body is a 1, 2, 3 method. So what I mean by that is the head is going to be considered a 1 unit. So if I draw the head, that's going to be 1. And then the length of the body would correspond to about 2 lengths of the head. All right, so this would be a 1 and a 2. And then the arms are going to be a 2 unit as well. So a 1 and a 2. So it's not exact, I'm not measuring this precisely, but it'd be 2 lengths of the head. And then the legs are going to be a 3. So the legs are about 3 times the head. 1, 2, 3. Now, on the second section, if you're bending the knee, it's going to be in the middle of that second section. So here's your 1, 2, 3 formula for drawing a body. So they'll practice this in their sketchbook, and you want to kind of go around, and what I'll usually do when I'm teaching this lesson, when we're talking about proportion, I ask the kids, do you know what proportion means? And they may or may not. It's like, are things the right size relative to each other? So I might really exaggerate, and I'll say, is this person in the right proportion? And they'll be like, no, that's not right. Or what about this person? Is that the right proportion? No, that's not right. But lo and behold, you go to their sketchbook, and this is, they'll have drawn this, and you're like, oh, is that, they can recognize it, but they can't necessarily translate it when they're doing their own drawing. So the 1, 2, 3 method is a good way to teach them. Measure out your 1, measure out your 2s, and get the correct proportion. So when they get their final paper, they'll have different colors to choose from. And they're going to start with a head. You can cut out heads, they can draw a head. I actually just went and got a punch, and I just made a bunch of heads and use that as my measurement. And that way they can also have an extra one, and they can use that as their guide. So they'll attach their head on. It sounds funny, but that's what they're going to do. And then they're going to draw their body in this 1, 2, 3 proportion. So they can take the head and measure. Okay, I've got 3, I've got 2 heads for my arm length, and so on. So have them think about an action or an activity that they want their person to be doing. They've got the proportions of the body, their head. Then they're going to collage on top of their pencil line. So they're going to have a variety of patterned papers, fabrics, wrapping paper, maps, newspapers, anything fun that you can think of. You can add yarn, buttons. It's really fun for the kids to just kind of get creative. You can show them how they can cut shapes to be clothing. Some kids will want to cut little teeny tiny shirts and skirts, and that's okay too. Or they can just cut geometric shapes. You know, a big triangle could be a dress. You know, the legs could just be rectangles put together. Show them again, like we were talking about in the Banda mask, you fold paper, cut once and have two. So if they want to cut something for shoes, fold your paper, then cut it once and you have two shoes that match. I save up different materials throughout the year that, you know, kids can use. If you're behind on your scrapbooks, I'm about 10 years behind on mine, but you know, you might have a lot of scrapbook paper that you can use. This is an example. This is just like bubble wrap. You know, that's fun that the kids can use. This was a student sample from last year that I happen to have, and one technique that they can try is that jagged cutting technique and then join them together to make that background show through. And then they can also collage landscape details. Buttons and ribbon are all fun things that you can use for these projects as well. So it is time consuming. There's going to be some materials that are going to be hard for the kids to cut. So if you use a really thick fabric or you know, leather or something, because they have just these kids' scissors. So just kind of be aware when you're choosing materials that it's something they can cut with the scissors. I usually will never help the kids cut anything. Like, I will show them how to do it, but they're like, oh, can you cut me a shoe? Or, you know, I usually will say, oh, let's draw your shoe first, and then you can cut on the line. Like, if they're having trouble figuring out, why don't you draw it and follow your lines? Or show them how to use the scissors correctly. If they're not holding it right, they might just not have much experience. This might be the one exception where if there's a fabric that is really hard to cut with a kid's scissors, I might help them just cut a fabric that's very difficult. But otherwise, I really encourage them, because if they don't do it, they're never going to get that skill. You know, but you want them to be safe. So let them cut themselves, not cut themselves, but cut by themselves as much as possible. Don't let them cut themselves. All right, so that's beard. And any questions on that before we move to the next one? That's a really fun lesson. So give yourself some time to do that class. All right, so this next one. Oh yes, good question. Oh yeah, so they glue it on with either the glue bottle or the Q-tip, whatever method you use. It's helpful to kind of lay out their pieces, lift up maybe corners of the different collage pieces, and then they can dot them on to glue it. And then actually the final step, I forgot to tell you, they're going to use they can use oil pastels, or they can use, I use fine tip markers, I think. They can draw on some details if they want facial features, if they want some, you know, final details. Don't give them the markers or oil pastels to the very end till they finish the collage, because otherwise they're very comfortable with drawing, they just start drawing, and you want them to really focus on the collage part of it. So introduce those markers at the very end. All right, so that is that. The next lesson is based on an Egyptian stela. Let's get back to that lesson. All right. And I will be honest, I usually skip this lesson. It's not one of my favorites, but you might, I don't want to bias you, you might feel differently. And there's usually some kids that are very, very interested in Egyptian history and hieroglyphics. They're very fascinating for the kids. So you might find that you really love this lesson. And we can see this is another carved piece, although it's carved on a stone. So what do we think these people are doing? Getting married. Okay, that's a good guess. Yeah, could be. A divorce. Goes all the way back to Egyptian times, you know. It could be, and it could be. It kind of looks like there's a lot of objects here, and I think maybe they were giving some sort of offering. You know, maybe they were very big believers in what happens after, you know, you take possessions with you after you die, or, you know, maybe they were giving some offerings to ensure that they would have a plentiful supply in their afterlife. But if we look at these figures again, so we see this guy is standing, these people are sitting, and they're about the same height. So it's probably not exactly in the correct proportions. They're a little bit stylized. We see these people in profile, but their eyes sort of look like they're seen from a frontal view. So, and their shoulders are kind of turned to a frontal view. So we're a little bit unusual. And we see a lot of symbols, hieroglyphics. They were one of the first cultures that had written pictorial language. So this lesson they're going to be doing an Egyptian style stela. Let's see, I don't think you're doing this project. Let's see. Is there a sketch? Are they sketching with this one? Oh, yeah, they can practice. So what you'll get is a handout. This is sideways, but how to draw hieroglyphics. So there's these little pictures for each letter. So they can think about maybe it's their name that they're going to draw in hieroglyphics, or maybe it's something special to them. Now these pictures are quite complicated. So I would not expect that, you know, they're going to be drawing these, you know, whole condor. You know, maybe it's like a simplified version of a bird that they can draw. If they want to, you know, they can certainly draw or attempt to draw the best that they can of that symbol. They can practice in their sketchbook maybe something that they want to draw, or other, you know, Egyptian type symbols. You know, maybe it's this, I think I did that upside down, but any Egyptian symbols that they want to practice drawing. Then they're going to get a tan sheet that looks like this, and what you are going to need to do is cut it into this stela shape. So it's really just cutting the top of it around. Then they're going to want to divide it, and they're going to be using oil pastels and divide their paper. They'll have a rectangle in the middle. So in the middle, they're going to be, I'll show you this kind of finished one already. They're going to be doing an Egyptian figure in the middle, and what they'll have, I get prepared. You're going to need to cut out your templates of the Egyptian figure again. So this is hopefully is done for you, but if not, yeah, you'll need to cut some of these templates out. The kids are going to use these to trace around. So they'll put their figure in this center section. They can draw Egyptian style hairdos, jewelry, any other symbols that they want to add in. On this top section is where they're going to do their hieroglyphics. So if they want to do their name, spell out some special word in the code. Now, this person looks like they cut their stela after they did their hieroglyphics, so cut them before so the kids know how to fit them in. And then this is a special offering. So we've got like their little offering table, different foods that they might want to include in their offering, and they're just going to color with their oil pastels. So pretty simple, other than the, you know, practicing drawing the hieroglyphics can be a little bit complicated, and then the prep for cutting out, so allow your prep time to cut out your templates and also to cut around your stela. And if the kids want to draw more than one figure, you know, because it is a template, they can do more than one if they like. All right, any other questions on that one? Well, you know, I guess I find that drawing around a template is not really my favorite. Like I like to let them do something that's a little more individual And certainly you can say, draw your own figure. You don't have to use the template. It might not look as Egyptian as this. So that's just my personal. Plus, they do a lot of oil pastel projects in this series, so it's kind of a material that we use. I only have time to do 10 in our school, so I have to pick a couple, and this is just one that I tend to skip. But I've done it before, so try it. You know, if it's, you might love it, and who knows. All right, any other questions? Good? Okay. So this one, so this is a piece by Joan Miro. And, all right, so what do you think this is a painting of? A person, okay. Anything else? Any other ideas? Oh, we're playing an instrument, okay. It does kind of look like, yeah, it kind of looks like a shape of an instrument here. Now, what do you think if I turn it this way? Anything different?
I see animals.
Animals, okay. This is actually the way it's supposed to be, is this direction, and I started out purposely upside down because, well, number one, it's written upside down, but also because I want the kids to see that you can see it from different perspectives, and it changes kind of what you think about it. So when I turned it this way, oftentimes people will start thinking of a sun, whereas when it's this way, you might not think of it like that, right? So it's actually called Two People, a Dog, and the Sun. So, you know, who knows? This might be the dog, or this might be the person. You might have the head and the body this way, and maybe this is the dog over here. And maybe this is the person, but it's very abstract, right? So it's up to your imagination and up to your interpretation of how you think about it. And again, we notice a lot of primary colors, although he's only used the yellow just in that one small area. The rest of the colors look fairly balanced throughout, but he's just used that yellow in one small section. I wonder why. I don't really know. I mean, maybe, you know, maybe it was just to kind of give your eye a focal point. I like to, and I didn't bring them with me, but if you cut out shapes of this sun in different colors of paper, you can put them on top of this red and see, like, how does this change the mood? If I were to cut out a bright yellow sun and put it on top, how does that change? How does it change how your eye moves around the painting? So Miro would often use a technique called spontaneous or automatic style of drawing, where he would just do some squiggles or lines and then just see where it took him. You know, not necessarily having a plan ahead of time of what he was going to draw or paint. Start with just some lines and then develop your drawing out of that. So that's what the kids are going to be doing. They're going to be doing a spontaneous or automatic style of drawing. And first they're going to practice in their sketchbook just different lines. You know, see how it feels to do wavy lines versus jagged lines. Maybe they can do some Miro style of shapes. You know, we've got kind of the face here, some little stars, there's some swirls. Just get your hand going, do some practice lines in their sketchbook. And then this project, and actually with most of the projects, almost all of them, people have different styles of teaching. Like some people do projects step by step, where they will say, okay, everybody draw your head. And then when everybody's done, then they say, okay, now next we're going to paint this. And I actually like to tell the kids the whole project ahead of time and then just let them go at their own pace and give them reminders as they go. So as I pick up the sketchbooks, I'll say, okay, now write your name on the back of your paper and start drawing with your oil pastel, or start with your yellow paint, and just kind of give general reminders. I find it's very hard to get kids' attention back once they've started working, but you might I've seen people do it that way effectively, and you might find that that works better for you. So just kind of use your judgment, and you'll kind of develop your own style as you get going. This is one where I actually do have the kids start this part of the project all at the same time. So I'll have them close up their sketchbook and then start this project together, because what I'm going to have them do is close their eyes and start with a spontaneous or automatic drawing on their final paper. So what we're going to be using for this is the chalk pastels. We haven't used those yet in first grade. This is what your chalk pastel will look like. And you should have a black sheet of paper as your next one in your pile. And if you locate your chalk pastels, that's what we'll be using. So pick out a light color of chalk pastel. Maybe it's white, maybe it's yellow, light pink. All right, and what we're going to do is I'm going to have the kids will close their eyes, and some will like not, they want to peek and they really want to draw. But the idea is to try to get them away from drawing realistic objects. So just kind of let your hand flow, do some lines. You might just count to 3. You know, your paper is very small, so draw slow. But if you close your eyes and you just count to 3, just draw some curvy lines, draw some jagged lines, and just see where it gets you. All right, is everybody ready? Do you want to do it together? Okay, close your eyes and we'll go 1, 2, 3. Oh, all right, so I've got that. Now you can come back and maybe you can add. I'm turning my paper. Oh, what do I see? Oh, okay. You know, maybe I'm going to add something onto my paper now. All right, and then the kids are going to color in with their chalk pastel. Now, chalk pastel is probably the messiest medium that we're going to be using. It's even messier than finger paint, I find, just because it kicks up so much dust. So make sure you're reminding the kids as they're doing their drawing that you don't want to blow the dust in their friends' faces or across the table. You don't want to be breathing in a lot of that dust. Have them just tap it gently on the side of the newspaper on their table. If they've got a trash can that they can go to and tap the dust off, it's very helpful. They can also wear smocks for this one is a good idea. Right. Then they're going to color in the sections. Pick some bright colors and try not to have 2 of the same color next to each other, so you get 2 different colors adjacent. And then you can also show them or remind them how, if you layer 2 colors of chalk pastel on top of each other or next to each other, they blend really easily and really nicely with your finger. Make sure you remind them that you want to try to maintain, as you're blending, you want to try to maintain these lines. So your light color or your white lines in between. You can go back and reinforce some of the lines, but sometimes the kids will get so excited about the blending, they just sort of blend it all away. So tell them, oh, it's going to be, you know, very Miro-like to keep those segments. All right, so you're going to color. In your sections. Blend, blend. Some people use white oil pastels, or you can even use maybe a white chalk marker or something to color in if you're really worried about them blending away their lines. I generally find that if you just tell them, they're pretty good about it. And they don't have to color in every section if they want to leave some negative space. They can certainly do that. Okay, and then when they've got all the color in that they want, they can come back and add patterns. Maybe they want to add polka dots. Maybe they want to add some lines. if they want to add. If they feel like there's been a character that's kind of come out or a creature that's kind of come out, maybe they want to add facial details. If it looks like there's a face, they can do kind of Miro style face. Maybe they want to do some Miro style stars. So just keep going with their chalk pastel. And then at the very end, they can think about, like, what did my design come out looking like? Turn it different ways, and what do you think it is? And they can write a title. So maybe mine's a girl on a Segway. And they can write their title. On their piece. Now the pieces that are done with chalk pastel, you're going to have to spray with a fixative when they're done so that the chalk doesn't continue to smear. And what we use, you can buy special fixatives, but we just use any aerosol, inexpensive aerosol hairspray. I wait until the kids are gone, take it outside, and just hold it like 8 to 10 inches away, do a light spray, and it will help seal the chalk. It doesn't seal at 100%, but it's a lot better than without the fixative. When I'm storing these, I always store them also with a slip sheet in between, even if I've sprayed them with the fixative, because you'll find that a lot of the chalk gets on the back of the piece. So if you're storing them in a stack, you want to protect the one below it. All right, so that's a really fun one. It's also pretty quick. So if you don't have a long time, that's a good lesson to do. All right. So keep going with that one. I know it's very messy. We can use the hairspray at the end before you take it home. Okay, and our last lesson is a super fun one. This is Jackson Pollock. Another favorite of the kids. They all love this one. Oops. All right, so is this realistic or abstract? Abstract, yes, that's an easy one. Obviously, how do you think he painted this? Yeah. Just threw paint or splattered paint on the canvas. Yes, that's exactly right. Now, do you think he planned out his composition, or did he just randomly start throwing paint around? Okay, some people say random. Yeah. He actually did have a plan in mind. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to come out exactly as planned, but he would be able to choose his colors. He could choose the order which he painted his colors. What color do you think he painted first? Can you tell? The blue or the yellow? Yeah, you can kind of see those are sort of the larger solid areas where you've got these kind of fine drippy lines on top of it. Some kids will start seeing objects appear, like some people will say, oh, this is a dragonfly and here's a cactus, you know, they'll start. That's kind of one of the cool things about abstract art is you can interpret it your own way. Everybody's going to see something a little bit different. So the kids are going to be doing a Jackson Pollock inspired painting. Jackson Pollock was around recently enough that there's video footage of him online, so it's kind of neat to show. There's one clip in particular that shows him with a huge canvas on the ground, and he's just walking around it, spraying paint and dripping paint on it. I have to say that he does like smoke a cigarette through the entire video, so I was sort of hesitant. I'm like, oh, do I show this in the classroom? And I explained to the kids, well, you know, he's smoking a cigarette. This was kind of before they knew how bad they were for you. And so I showed the video, and the kids didn't react at all when he was smoking the cigarette, but at one point he throws it on the ground, and they're like, oh, he littered. And so the littering was a big deal. You know, they didn't, yeah, so if you wanted to show them, it's really kind of interesting. It was the action of painting that was as equally as important as the painting itself. So there are many different ways to do this project. Some people like to do it outside if you have an area where you can lay out. I always find that there's a big gust of wind at some point and it will come up, but if you have a place where you can do it, where you can secure, you know, the papers on the ground and do it kind of in that way. I'll show you the way I always do it. I save up these boxes throughout the year. This is an actual one that's been used several times. So I just kind of tape it, and I have the kids start out with their paper at their desk, and they'll get a large brush, and you can choose what kind of color palette you want to do. I think it has some ideas, but you can choose what you want to give the kids. And they'll just kind of do abstract shapes in their background, you know, whatever they want to do. And they can mix colors. So it'll be sort of like the colors that Pollock would have painted first. You know, so here's your first layer. And I'm going to do some different colors layering. Okay, then they're going to take their paper that they've painted on the background. I have stations set up where I have the box, your squirt bottles of different colors of paint, and you'll also have a cup that will have black paint and a paintbrush. So that one's going to be the spatter. So these will be the squirt ones, and you'll have black with a brush that's a spatter. What I do is, remember I showed you this laminated sheet before? Actually, I have another one over here. I actually have them put this on the laminated sheet and then have them lower it into the box on the sheet so that when you lift it out, if it's got a lot of paint on it, which it will, it's a little easier. It gives it some stability. All right, so they'll lower it into the box, and I won't show you with the box so you can see a little bit better, but then they're going to take their paint. So that's a good example of what could happen. Not a big deal. If that happens, you can just switch it out. You can scrape the paint off and just keep going. You know, it's not a tragedy. So maybe it just adds to my composition, right? Perfect. So let's keep going, and they'll squirt, so they can just squirt lines. You know, have them do some off the page where it's going off the edge. If you have different types of squirt bottles, like this one, you'll see, hopefully, we'll have a little bit thicker nozzle, so you might get some that are more dots. Then they'll have the one with the spatter, so they can spatter with their paintbrush. Lift it out, and then there's your Pollock. The first color that they use, so if like I squirted with my white, they can end with that color too, so that they have that layering effect. Now this will be your best friend. This is a paper clip because as you see, these paints get clogged really easily. So this will be at each station, and you can just use these to unclog your paints as needed. Keep in mind, if you have a drying rack that you move these onto, if your drying rack is slanted, like my drying rack is slanted, and one year I put them on the drying rack and didn't realize, and all the paint like pooled towards the back of the painting. So now I put them flat for a little bit first and let them dry a little, and then move them onto the drying rack. So this one, it's great to have some more helpers, because depending on how many stations you can have, the kids might have to wait a little bit and take their turn and kind of watch the other kids. I also do this as a large group project. So I cut up a floor canvas. I put it on a big tarp and have all the kids stand around it, and they squirt paint on the on the canvas. So it's a lot. I mean, it's, you know, the kids really, really love it though. It's a lot of fun. If your school has some sort of art auction, it's a great one to, you can just frame it and have all the kids contribute, and it could be a good piece to have at an art auction, or just display it at an art show. You can cut it into smaller pieces if you want and send the kids home with each with a piece. If you're going to do it for a framed piece or something, you might think about having acrylic paint rather than the tempera, because it will not crack off of the canvas as easily if you want it to be something that lasts. And then art shows. We talked about how you put the the labels on it. So one of the ways to use the labels are to put them on the back just for the name. If you're going to be using them at the art show, you want to put the labels not directly on the piece itself, but have some sort of little frame or border around your piece where you can put the labels. So they can get cut off if the parents or whatever want to keep the piece and not have that label on it. So that's where you would put the labels for the art shows. And I think that is about it. We're about at 12 o'clock, so I want to give you guys enough time to get out. But any final questions before we wrap it up? You guys feel good? I know those first graders are very intimidating, but you should, it just takes a while to kind of get your timing. You know, that's kind of like how long do you leave for the project versus how long do you let them work on it. And as you're going out, if you want to put your dirty brushes or water in the buckets here on the side, that would be great. If you would like to spray your chalk piece, I'll put this by the trash can and you can spray that a little bit before you go. So take your masterpieces with you. You can show your kids. You can have it in your sample box at school if you want. And I'll be here if you have any other questions before you head out.